This morning, I'm speaking with Kateryna Mikhalitsyna, a Ukrainian writer, translator, literary editor, columnist, member of PEN Ukraine, and a volunteer. The award-winning author of more than 20 books for children and several collections of poetry, her picture book, Who Grows in the Park, illustrated by Oleksandr, has been listed in the White Raven catalog of 2016, and the Who Grows series has been published in 8 countries. A nonfiction book, Reactors Do Not Explode, a brief history of the Chernobyl disaster, written together with Stanislav Dvornitsky, has been listed in the White Raven catalog of 2021. Kateryna lives in Lviv with her partner, the 3 children, and an adopted dog. Welcome, Kateryna.
Welcome. Good morning or good evening from our time.
Yes. Yes. I wanted just to begin with a little bit of a context for our viewers. Aside from wanting to know the name of your dog, I also would like to know where you were born and where you live now, and kind of how you got to where you live now.
So this is an interesting and rather long story to start with, but my dog's name is Fresh. I don't know why Fresh. We took him. He's like yes, in English we call it Fresh. He was like Max Fresh 086, as far as I remember. This was his full name on the cage from which we, in the shelter from which we took him a year and a half ago. He's like a 5 or 6 years old. We took him in the end of December, and it was very unanimous choice for us as a family, because we all were at the shelter, me, my husband, and 3 our children. There were more normal, so to say, dogs, like doing these crazy things, like dog do, very funny, very runny, fussy, and he was very sad, and he was obviously traumatized with something, with his past or whatever, and he even didn't want to go out of his small house inside the cage. And somehow we decided that this dog is exactly ours, and he is really, he has a bit of all of us inside of one doggy body. But first he was like 2 or 3 days at our home, and we seen that he liked to listen to when the books are read aloud.
Wow.
We had a very long tradition of reading aloud. We started this tradition. Actually, we read aloud. I read to my husband. He sometimes read to me, but mostly it's my favorite job to do, either with adult people or with children, reading aloud in different voices. And I read to my children, and the dog just came. He was very scary. He was obviously uncomfortable at home, but I was reading to my daughter, who is now 12 and was 11, and the youngest son, who will be 5, so at that time he was 4, and we were reading Helena Dovichenko book about city elves, I guess it should be called, about Lviv, fantasy, adventures, and the dog sat on the floor, and he was doing like that. His eyes closed. He wanted to sleep. I was reading, and he like nodded. He banged his nose into the bed and woke up.
Wow.
Then again, and the third time he just came closely to us. It was for the first time ever, and he put his head onto my hand, and that's his favorite way to sleep even now, to put his nose or his head into somebody's hand, and this was a sign of absolute trust somehow, and of the responsibility, very visible, very felt for all of us. And then right now he is a part of our family, and we are very glad. As from where I came and how I came to the way I live right now, I came from my native town is called Mlynów. It is a rather small town in the Rivne region, in between Dubno and Lutsk. It is very beautiful. I feel strong connection to it, not as a town, not as a social construct, but as a land, as a river, as a part of my childhood. to explain, if I need to explain how I get there, so I need to mention my grandmother,
Mhm.
who lived in Poland and was forcibly displaced into the eastern part of Ukraine. She should live in Kateryna, which is Donetsk, but somehow, and I don't remember, and there are no any person who can explain to me it right now, somehow she just turned away. She was traveling together with her youngest sister, her very small daughter, which was my granny, and their mother, so only women, and that's all. And somehow they stayed there near Donetsk, somewhere near Donetsk, for a couple of maybe months, and then came back because she was going to reach back to Poland because she was going to rescue his husband, who, as I know already right now, was killed in Oswięcim, in Auschwitz. But somebody who was going the eastern direction told her somehow, she was informed by some other way, no one knows exactly, that her husband was already dead. So she stopped in the Rivne region, and that's where my history starts, actually, because my parents still live in a house that hello.
Greetings. Привіт. Добрий вечір. Звичайно, що дуже приємно зустріти. Так.
He actually used it if his mother talks in the telephone, a notebook, that he should say, hello, how are you? Not in Ukrainian, but in English.
Як він називається? What's his name?
Як називається?
Matthew.
Matthew. His name is Matthew. He tries to say it in English.
One of the writers of the Gospels. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes. He knows it. So my parents still lived in a house that was built by the hand of my grandmother and my grandfather. My grandfather was a builder, and they.
Wow.
Yes. So, and actually, she raised me up because everybody else was like it was usual in Soviet Union. They were all doing their jobs and not staying with children, and she was very if I know I think that the words are precious. That's maybe why I am working with the words, because and this feeling I had since my early childhood, because my grandmother, she was actually very silent person. And when she decided that something should be said, it was really something important, very important. Otherwise, she just preferred to stay silent. Maybe because it was of all she had lived through. Maybe because I know that she had a quite long period of time that nobody understood her ambitions, her thoughts, her feelings, maybe that. But the fact is, she was very silent. And she either stays silent or sings something. I have some memories. I don't remember her face properly. We have no photographs, only of her as a young person, not as an old one. So the person that I might remember, because she lived like 94 years, if I'm not mistaken. And sometimes she took me and I sat beside her on her very old bed. Again, if I'm not mistaken, that the bed she somehow took or gathered or bought, and it reminded of her old Polish home. She opened the album she exactly brought from her previous life and told me her story. I don't remember that story, and this is my in a way it is a resource of what I'm now, or what I was writing about, this family stories. So this unknowing is a part of that makes me write, that makes me explore, that makes me find what family and family history means to me, what being a woman in a family in a small town means to me. But in a way, I feel I feel regret that I don't, that I was so young. I didn't remember all the story properly. So she just took the album and said that this is my husband, this is this was my brothers, we were on this train carriage or something like that. They were going into the east, and after more than 20 years after her death, I took the way she was telling me this story and made a book of my own, because I have written this with Stanislav. I've written the non-fiction book about the Chernobyl, but I also by myself written a book about Chernobyl, but for younger children. It is called The Flowers Near the Fourth Block, let's say so. And it is the way the main hero of this, it is also a grandmother. So she behaves exactly like my granny was behaving. And actually it was, though it is quite like a 40 with something pages. And for me, it was quite a long text to write, but it was a flow. It was like I'm jumped in and jumped out of it after a week or some, and I felt my granny next to like a bird. I don't think of her as angel, but as a bird sitting on my, a bird without a face. I've sent you in a way.
Yes, send me an image of that bird, and I was wondering, was that your grandmother then?
Yes, in a way, that's my way to find her back visually, not on the level of words, not on a level of smelling and feeling, but I need some visual. I need visualization of her sometimes, and I never see her face, just her
handkerchief, yes.
Handkerchief, yes.
Yes.
But no face. So yes, that's why maybe that's the bird.
I see. Beautiful.
And again, without eyes, without any face features, because I'm still looking for it.
Wow.
For her face or for my own face, it's still a question, but still. So that's the bird, and that's the place where I lived. And I write and draw and do something with clay as long as I remember myself. But you know, I am from a small town, small Ukrainian town, where to be different was not very easy. Vice versa, exactly. It was quite not good for me. Somehow, as a childhood, I decided to stay very quiet, maybe to hide everything, not to do what others in a way expected me to do, rather than to express myself properly. So after that, after I left Mlyniev at 17 for Rivne, I studied biology at the university, and it was not at all what I expected of the higher education to be. It was very, because there were no proper education. It was more like you need not understand, but you need to learn what I told you to learn. And if you ask why is it so, don't ask, just learn. And that's all. That's not for me. I'm quite rebellious, for at least inside. At first it was very hard, let's say so. It was not very easy. But I met a person there in Rivne, not in the university, but in, I don't know how to call it, a palace of youth, let's say so, who is called Tatiana Ivanivna Gorbukova, and she has a poetry studio. Oh. And for a couple of times, I just came and listened to what people or children like me, young people, were saying, how she explained, and moreover, how she listened to what those young people were telling to her, how they were fighting, how they protecting their thoughts and their feeling in poetry, and why they use this or that word or this or that verse form. And in a way, that's the first the first person who actually told me that, you know, you are a poet. No, I am not a poet. I had, at that time, Vasil Stus was my favorite Ukrainian poet. And actually, I used to quote his the part of his, I guess it was preface to the letters to his son, where he said in Ukrainian, я не поет, якби поетам, ну, якби було добре жити, я не був би поетом, а робив би коло землі. Там, there is not, it's not an exact quote, but it is from there. So I used this quote to say, no, I'm not a poet. I'm just a person writing something, because I cannot do otherwise. I cannot stop this.
That's always to me the sign of a true poet. It's Jean Cocteau once said that, what does it mean to be a poet? It means to write but not be a writer.
Yeah, anyway, for quite a long period of time, it was much easier for me to identify myself by this. I am writing poetry, I am writing books, I am drawing, for example, or I'm translating, I'm editing by exactly the process of what I'm doing, because I know for sure that's what I do. If I am poet, if I am translator, that is still a question, because right now I'm back to this stage, whether I am translator or would I be translator after the war in Ukraine finished. So it's again a question, but I am translating, I am writing poetry, and I'm writing for children. That's who I am. And after I had friend who lived again in my small town of Leniv, and he studied in Lviv Polytechnic, and he asked me to sometimes to go and visit him in Lviv. I went and visited him in Lviv, and I met my husband. So now I'm like more than 20 years already in Lviv.
And is your husband a writer, or?
He would kill me if he would listen what I'm saying now, but I think of him as an artist. In that meaning that artist, I don't remember who said that the artist is a man or a woman who changes the space around him or her. So that's why he is an artist for me, because he plays guitar. He likes to run very much. Right now, running is his favorite way to come to himself after working after the war or whatever. So it's his it's his great challenge that he throws to himself, and to that's his also a point of growth for himself, for him, because he likes to challenge himself, and to overcome to become a more and more better person than you are right now. So this is maybe the greatest way to become a person, and the only way to know that you are moving somewhere in some direction, because if you are comparing yourself to others, so that's not a proper way, I guess.
I agree. It's beautifully said. Yes. So you came to Lviv, and did you discover
Actually, he was studying, and I was like, we were living in how to say it, in hurtozhitok. I don't remember. I don't know the proper English word. Not maybe for the notion that the word must explain, but it was exactly hurtozhitok, for people living together, doing things together, and that was what I was thinking about, what student might be and student's life might be. We gathered together. It was mostly boys, because the Polytechnic school was like, it was like 2 or 3 girls on the floor, on all floor. We were preparing food together. We were playing together. We just went to someone's room, and someone started playing guitar. Someone started reading poetry or talking about books, though they were technicians, not even humanitarian specialities in any way. And that's why when I started translating, I let myself to try and translate. And my first translation was like, I bought a book, actually it was 2 books of Oscar Wilde. I bought it near Fedorov, where is this small book market, let's say so, in Lviv. And I was fond of Oscar Wilde's work, but it was my first chance to read, because again, I am from a rather small town, and the books were not the things of the priority over there. So when I was a child, I read whatever I had a chance to reach and actually start to read. It was not children's literature, or it was whatever actually and it was mostly Russian language books, because there were no or very little Ukrainian translation then in the 90s. So I bought this.
Oscar Wilde is such a sophisticated choice.
Yes. So I don't know if I was older. I don't think that I have courage to do this, but somehow Rostislav Dutsenko translated this the portrait of Dorian Gray brilliantly, but I was always somehow dissatisfied with the preface, rather short preface to the text. When I grabbed this book with the preface in original, somehow this is that, and I made like 5 or 6 or whatever number of tries to at least to try to explain, to show to Sashko, my husband's name is Sashko, so first for him and for those who were sitting and listening, reading, doing whatever. So I wanted to share this magical words, connection between words, and how this works, how this recreates inside you something that maybe Oscar was not thinking about while he was writing this, but how this actually, the magic of transforming words from language into language and from person into person. It was, I guess, this what helps me to the writing, to the creating something, this magic, because it really works. I mean, if you are ready to listen to, and if you are ready to share, really share, not trying to, not pretending, but deeply share what you are into, so the words will flow and catch the other person with whom you are sharing it. So that's the magic, and somehow they connect people from different sides, from different countries, and this is really precious for the words.
No, absolutely, beautifully said. And then, did you come across other writers in Lviv? Was there a lively literary scene? What years was this? Because I was in Lviv for the first time in 1990.
I started. That was in the earliest 2000. I guess I arrived here like 2001, and so 1 and 2, I was all around student life, we were trying to find some flat or apartment or wherever. We already had 2 cats, and it was not easy even then to find a flat, an apartment or wherever. So we have this, and we have some friends to share the apartment. So it was quite an interesting life. I don't really remember how I get into the literary world of.
Were there Ukrainian writers that you were reading that you had
since that time, and up till now, my love gets stronger and stronger. The most beloved, the god of my poet in inner poetry is Hritsco Chubai. I actually first get to know when I was 16 or 17. I wrote Lyudmila Taran, who is also a great writer, Ukrainian writer, wrote an articles into the newspaper called Ukraina Moloda, and I read, I guess that article even called like Pritcha, like the poet, like the name of one of the Hritsco's poems. And then it was the first book. When I visited book forum for the first time, I bought this Plach Yeremiyi that Calvaria published, and it's still a treasure to me, because it's the start of my literary life in all possible senses, from the place, from the books, that it was really a choice. I'm a girl from a small town. Even in Rivne, it was not much modern literature, and it was not such a great internet like we have today. So being at forum and buying these books for myself. Now it seems very funny, but it both funny and something pleasant to remember, because these things they still feels like unique things. Though right now I get into publishing business like in 2007 or something like that. As my first translation was published officially published, the book translated. It was Tolkien's The Tale of Children of Húrin, newly published 2 years before in England, in English. So since then, I'm in this way or that in a publishing business, but still this book and my first visit of Publishers Forum, this is precious.
Absolutely. And but it's remarkable that Tolstoy, I was going to say Tolkien, very different, I know, that Tolkien arrived in Ukraine so quickly. Had you read any of the trilogy or any of the other, his Lord of the Rings books?
Before that, just some years ago, the films were out, like the trilogy of Lord of the Rings were out. We tried to watch it, but it was not, we were not very greatly impressed of the film.
Sure.
And it's Astrolabia Publishing House, and personally Oleg Fashovets, who is the director of the publishing house, he decided that all Tolkien must be translated into Ukrainian. And actually I had some friends, because you asked about how I came to the literary scene, so to say. I have a great friend whose name is Albina Pozniakova. She's also in United States right now. She was always and still is writing great poems for the first place, but she was also a good cultural manager, and she with several colleagues, she published, it was a self-published newspaper called The Three. And Irina Shuvalova was published there as a poet. I was published there as a poet and as a translator. I don't remember if I draw something, but still. Pavlo Korovchuk, so those who are right now in the field. So yes, Albina has a talent to gather us all together. We have presented this, I guess I even have this last issue of this Free magazine or newspaper. I don't really remember, but I have it in like a A4 sheets of A4 published on both, printed on both sides, but still it was very important because nobody censored us. We needed to be famous, so we just published what we wanted to publish and talked about what we wanted to talk. We actually talked about feminism there and about gender, which was quite unusually on the, so to say, official scene, at least as far as I know and remember. It was again the early 2000s. And she was somewhere, because there was this underground, not official underground. I don't know if they were really underground, but we have bookish meetings like on a on Polaron plant. It was destroyed a couple of years ago and rebuilt on a new office building, but before it was just an old plant, and there were people selling books there, talking about books there, reading something new. So it was that was actually what I expected that a literary life must look like in a way. So that's how I was a part of it in a way. Again, a very shy part, and because maybe because of my granny, maybe because of my character. I usually prefer more to listen and contemplate than to talk. It was I just was gathering impressions and whatever. But still, fortunately, there were no Facebook there. So the discussion were really discussion. They might be very hot, but still they were discussions, not using the Ukrainian word srach, not that. It was, that's why maybe, Albina introduced me to those two boys from philosophical faculty, and they introduced me to Oleg, actually, Fishovets, who was teaching there on the philosophy faculty of Ivan Franko National University. And they introduced me like a translator or a poet who is translating. By that time, except Oscar Wilde, I already tried and translate something of Jim Morrison.
Really?
Yeah.
The Doors?
Yeah, because it was absolutely not mine. I mean, of the Wilde is something he was very close to me, to how I was using language. Morrison was not at all something similar, even not a tiny bit, but that was interesting to try and to play with completely different kind of language, to find it in myself first, but and then to try it and to render on a paper. And Oleg Fishovets asked me to play with, again, absolutely different type of language, which was Tolkien's. I knew who Tolkien is, but I never read anything. What he not nothing about Hobbit, nothing about the Lord of the Rings, and it was something very new. So I have this like a preface made by Oleg Vasilyevich, who is Tolkien, and why we need to translate this. I need to grab through the first 10 or 12 maybe pages, because it was just a list of names of elves and kings and whatever. And then the story began. And when this story began, it was such a brilliant language. It was such economically used, such precisely each word on each place. And if I have this, sometimes I even felt I need an adjective here, but no, you shouldn't. I'm rather author-centric translator, so I try to render the author, not the idea for the first time, but the language is also very important to me. I try to stick so much close to the original, even in the language, as Ukrainian language led me to do this. So that was again a challenge, but I guess it was. I pass it in a way. Though again, if this happened not in my 25, 24, so I was like that. So I don't know if I now would try to translate Tolkien, not knowing almost anything, next to anything about him and the language and whatever. But I translated. This was the first translation. From one side, I had a huge critic, because everybody tried to, even those Russian reading Ukrainians, Russian, they have no choice either to read original or Ukrainian translation. So me and the publishing house had a lot of long letters of what is not right in the translation and the names and how I even dared to translate it. But on the other hand, we had a huge interest in Ukrainian readers, because it was not, so again, no alternative, just Ukrainian translation. In a way, it was very interesting, and that's when I actually seen that if there were no Russian books close at hand, so the Ukrainian originally or Ukrainian translated books would have much more chance to live, to go to the audience. And again, I've seen how much work we need, all that are doing something with Ukrainian language books, how much work is ahead of us, because we need to overcome this prejudice that Russian language is richer, that Russian translations are better just because they are Russian. So because the first point in the critic was, you cannot translate Tolkien into Ukrainian. There are no enough words, no enough language, no enough so.
And you found the language. Tried
to collectively, actually, because Oleg helped me. Nazar Fedorak, who is also a great poet, and he was literary editor, and he is specialist in medieval literature, which actually helped me with. I'm rather intuitive in my language. Sometimes I have technical in a way problem, but Nazar is very good, brilliant in technical details. So if these were combined together, so that's how I guess it best worked. We all were working together to do the best text possible. That's, I guess, how the publishing team must
absolutely, yeah, no,
aim
great.
at and what they must do. So it was quite a long period of talking in my life because I translated this one, then the Tale of Perilous Realm. It's the short stories, and that's my favorite of all things in Tolkien. Then I translated the Lord of the Silmarillion, and the Lord of the Ring also. So I have like.
Oh my goodness.
And I have, when I started all this Tolkien's epoch, I had only one child, the oldest son, Anton, and then Yarina was born. And I guess I needed some quite short period to breathe out in between the translation and something like that. But the period was not very long because I met Mariana Savka, and though I knew her personally before, but Mariana met Mikhalitsyna, who became a director of the Old Line, and actually after the crisis of 2008, putting all things together after crisis. So Mariana met Mikhalitsyna, who became a director, and they decided that they need bigger team, publishing team. I mean, and then Mykola asked me to come to the team and become the let's say second editor, not only Mariana, because Mariana was becoming a face of the publishing house. Yes. So they took the PR manager, they took the rights manager, they took me as a deputy, Mariana's deputy. So the team become bigger and bigger and bigger. So when I came to the Old Lion at the 2012, I came first to, I started to work at the end of 2012. So there were like maybe 10 of us. And now Old Lion is like 100 with something people all over.
Wow, amazing.
And yes, in Kyiv, they have office here in Lviv, its main office, and a chain of book shops and cafes. And they have office in Dnipro, in Odessa, in Kyiv. That's all for the time being.
That's plenty.
And they were publishing like maybe 5 books when I came, and again, more than 100. I don't remember the exact number, but more than 100 books they publish now. And there was an Old Lion up till this 2012 till 2017 when my third child was born. So, and I am with them as an author, as an editor, as a translator. So still. So
is that your primary job, or is that your main work? I want to know.
Right now, no. Right now, I'm freelance. So since 2017, I became a freelancer because it's more honest, let's say so, because 3 children household. Yes. It's enough. A managerial job. I did not want any more managerial. I did just want to translate, to edit, to do word. Work, not managing. So that's, but the experience with the Old Lion was really huge because I was like a literary editor and author and translator and manager all in one. We visited many book festivals, many book fairs, especially abroad, and that's what again it's a huge resource of growth for me. It was and still is as an author. Bologna Book Fair, that's, I guess, that's what made me better, let's say, better children's author, because you have this huge lines of all possible kinds of children's book right behind you, before you, and you can do whatever, read, smell, read, whatever, and this is huge. It either stops you because you don't want to be just a tiny bit drop of all this, and you have this impression for the first time. It was like, I guess it was 2014 or 13 when I visited Bologna Book Fair. It was like I was just gasped, and that's all for a couple of days.
Yeah, sure.
And
sure.
Because it was really good for me as a manager, speaking, communicating, seeing how this works for foreign publishers, what actually worked and what doesn't work, what trends are. But for me as a children's writer, I have like two books, or one children's book by that time. They were published in online, and it was like, I shouldn't write anything. All is written. There are no enemies, so I should just stop and do nothing. But what amazed me at that very exhibition, that trees, as I guess I already mentioned it. If not, so I speak again, that I love plants. Even right now, when the war goes on, right before we were talking, and I was on my field, out of the like a few meters where the Lviv ends and the field begins, and it's absolutely amazing. And this is I don't know how to call calm, maybe, but I'm not very sure of how to explain these emotions when you stand on the ground and you're watching tiny plants grew out of it. Very different, absolutely different from one another. Because we call the grass, but biologists will say that not a grass. Each grass actually has a name.
Yes.
Each tree has a name, not just the trees. So even though the tree as a concept is very rich and magnificent, but each tree has a name and history. And we are, in a way, very much connected, much more connected to trees and plants than humans pretend to be.
I agree.
So my first education is biology. I'm a teacher of biology. In Bologna Book Fair, there was many topics based on trees, like from ABC for the youngest readers till the biography of Vincent van Gogh, based on a tree. It really amazed me how much can be said with the minimum things and with the help of a tree. And after I came back to Lviv, my daughter was like 5. She was in a kindergarten, and in the spring when I walk her to the kindergarten and back, she always asked me how this flower is called, how this tree is called, how this grass is called. It was her way to make a way to the road to the kindergarten longer, but it was a pleasant way to longer the road. And some day she asked me, Mama, you know so much names of the plant. Why you don't write a book of them, about them? I guess children would like to know their names too, as I knew them. And this was the final point. I started to write the series Who Grows. Actually, the first one is Who Grows in the Park. I guess it may be said that it is the most popular right now of the series. It is translated again even more than 8 countries, because I have the last copies. I had it in right before the war started, and it is in Crimean Tatar language, and it is so absolutely precious because thanks to some Turkish grant, these books, when the war stops, I do my best, and Zuleika, who is a translator, and the lady who initiated the process of translating, and who put many efforts to make this all happen. These books will be shared for free in the Crimean Tatar communities. This is absolutely what I'm looking for, actually. This what I want to happen. So this is, I have these 3 books of mine in Crimean Tatar. I try to read them, try to pronounce the words, but that's the story of the book. My
Yes.
children ask me, my child, the older son also, he was very, we have granny in a small town, so he knows, and he has a mother and a grandfather who knows how the trees are called, how the plants are called, because my father, now he is older, he also a great plant lover, and
Mhm.
he grows absolutely perfect tomatoes, and the August is a month of my father tomatoes that comes in every possible colors and shape, and I don't even imagine the August without this. So
Sure. Listen, Kateryna, I have to
yes.
tell you that I once took a weekend course with a shaman, a woman who from California, who her name is Isa Gucciardi, and she says that she's more of a plant than a person. And
Yes, that's
but she told me that there is this instrument that you can buy that translates the electric vibrations of plants into music.
mm-hmm. We
And-
have also this brilliant book by German author, The Language of Trees. There's a forester who explained that the native trees in a native forest are communicating with each other. They have
oh yes, sure.
special language. So
Yeah.
this is again, yeah. And I always knew that if you listen to the plants, you will hear them or hear yourself through them.
Yes.
It
I
might be
agree.
sometimes rather funny when somebody asks you to please go and hug a tree, but for me it still helps. And when I get again, I'm sorry to jump from one topic to another, but again to my granny, she actually, when she needed to
Great.
take a branch for something
Yes.
in the household, she always said to the tree, I'm sorry, but I need your branch for this and that and that.
Right.
And she believed that the trees has their own special paradise after they are cut down or they just died from an old age. And when I came to Lviv, and there was much more old trees here that there are now, and I knew almost all of them, at least at that neighbors where I dwell in this or that way. I was walking there or I was living there or whatever. So when I've seen the tree cut down, I actually get used to, and I did it for 3 or 4 years. I went to the cut tree and just pray for it to go to its special paradise.
Beautiful.
And I cannot, it was not and still is not a pose. It's my feeling. I live with this feeling. And actually I took a dog because there were too much old trees cut down at the end of the 2020, too much trees cut down in Lviv, and I felt like my hands were my arms were aching because when I saw this even or heard the sound of saw that was going to cut down the tree, I feel I feel my body ache, and it's not, I'm not pretending, it's my reaction. I think this Halka Kruk, maybe it's because maybe poets are more like trees than any other normal, than any other people and literary people, because Halka Kruk also written about that. She has the same feeling of pain all over her body when she saw it.
I believe it. I believe it. So what were you, just a couple more questions. What were you working on before the war began?
Except all this, ecology is absolute a theme that is, I guess, in all my children's book, but maybe in books for adult as well. But I don't have much books for adult. I have only like a couple poems collections of poetry. The first one was published again at the beginning of 20s in Rivne, but it was not quite my decision, not quite the choice of poems. It was decided more by an editor who was who worked in Ukrainian Writers Union than of me, because I was too young, like 17 or yes, I guess it was 17 or 18. And so I think that actually the only book of poetry that is published in online. It is called A Shadow in a Mirror.
Nice.
And it takes like the poems that are collected there is like 10 years something. And right before the war, I actually collected the other, because for me, it's more important just to write and let go. I mean, to feel, first of all, to feel something, to live it through, to write and let go. So I am quite satisfied with, I don't know whether I can call it happy. I guess I am addicted to the process, really, addicted is the word, to the process of writing, where you are totally in the process, when the words are flowing through you, not in you and through you and out of you then. So there's a circulation of words in you and on the paper, or in my case, on a screen of telephone or a notebook, because since I guess sometime I wrote directly into the Facebook feed.
Wow.
Because there was quite a strong feelings and I need to live it through and let go. So I was satisfied with all this. I don't really need, I'm of such a strange kind of poet that I don't need a book. I need this process of writing, of living and reliving, and sometimes of getting feedback. When people comment, or not even on a
Facebook post,
just under the post, but in the direct and the messenger or whatever, they just, it mustn't be many people. It might be few people, but I feel exactly that they live through their, or not my emotions, but their own emotions through my text. That was what I appreciate most of all. That's why I'm writing. So I managed to collect a book, thanks to Victoria Amelina, actually.
Oh, nice. Oh.
It was in a bit of a tale of mine, and asking, would you please do this for me? Would you please stop translating, managing, and wherever, and please collect your poems into a book? And also a great friend of mine who is called Inna, and she is in Vinnytsia now, and she is sewing and doing other helpful things to do some very helpful things for Ukrainian soldiers. She was also one of the very important person for me concerning this book. This book, how to translate it into English? In Ukrainian, it would be called, if it appeared somehow and somewhere, it would be called Люди з розладнаними серцями. It's partly thanks to Deborah Fogel, who actually, thanks to Irina Starovoy and her lectures about Deborah Fogel, I have this cycle of poems written as if I was a child sitting under the table and listening to the old ladies talking about their lives. It is first in a draft version, it was just called babi. I mean, in Ukrainian, so old ladies, because there were partly it was again my granny, partly it was some real people in my small town or in my family from the both sides, father side and mother side. But the general feeling, I was sitting under the table and listening to these stories that was just coming out of nowhere sometimes, or something just clicked in me, and I've written this. They were talking not in my head, but it sounds too crazy. I've seen something. So yes, it's more of some visual stimulus that I see, maybe a handkerchief that remind me of, or peonies. My neighbor called Nina loved peonies very much, so I've seen this. I wrote it like a year. They were just coming and non-stop. So just them, just my old ladies coming and speaking and speaking and speaking and speaking. So I made this book, but I cannot took this all together. They were two different, from two different sides of country, two different times. And after this, listening to this Irina's lecture about Deborah Fogel, and then reading to Deborah's texts, I managed to take to
synthesize
all the puzzle set up correctly as it must. So that was the book should be published, plan to be published in a way in the end of this year or in the beginning of the next one. So in a way, it's the answer to a question what I was doing, and that's writing about old ladies, about family histories, about specifically women's history.
Sure.
I also translated a book from Australian author, teenage book called Let's Talk About Consent, like a concept of consent, culture of consent, because again, I have a child, have a daughter, and we have great problems with the culture of consent that is not only about sex and sexual relationship, but about respect in each and every field, starting from the newborn, when you just need to take baby, or to say to your baby who cannot speak and even cannot wave her or his hand properly, but right now we are going to do this and that. Actually, we did this with Sashko. We always tell our children what we are going to do with them, even if they were very small. And this was very important to translate again, because I was volunteering for NGO called, I say it in Ukrainian, Horizontalna Medicina, which, yes, Anastasia Leuchina, who actually one of the founders of this NGO, was the person who opened the, how to say it, reanimation. Is it okay? Is it understandable? Reanimation, like in a hospital unit where so they, because in Ukraine it's a Soviet heritage that they were closed, and no parents can get through the child when the child for some reason get into this unit. How do you keep? It's not a reanimation. It's
right.
No, but you understand this. Of this,
I do.
She actually started the campaign because her own child died behind the closed door, and she hadn't even a chance to say goodbye.
I see.
My child, our youngest son, would die also if the doors of the reanimation were closed. But fortunately, the campaign started like a year before he was born. Wow. So we have a chance to, and our Ministry of Health opened we have this law that the reanimations are opened to the parents or carers or close people. So thanks to that, we actually saved our sons, because again, the problem in Ukrainian hospitals with dignity, we have brilliant doctors, but the problem with the attitude was absolutely the simplest human rights might be violent in the hospital if they have chance to, because they get used to, because it's a remnant of the Soviet system. So I helped Anastasia, whatever she asked me, translated something, wrote some columns, and again I wrote a cycle of poetry. In Ukrainian it sounds like Stacionarna zona, connecting being an admission patient, an inpatient with a zone like a prisoner. So while you are in Ukrainian hospital, you might feel yourself as a prisoner, and especially in mother with a child in such a kind of such a condition, it's even worse, because this is a thing of power. They have power. You are vulnerable because you need to take care of your child. You need to be supported, but instead of support, you get hate. You get whatever you can get, whatever except the support. So that's why I actually wrote the cycle because I need to free myself out of the emotions I felt related with the younger one. He has some problems with, he has it before his birth.
Yes.
And this will stay here with him for all of his life. So he has some specificities. So we stayed like for 3 or 4 months in the hospital. So just to get rid of the feelings of
Helplessness, of course.
Helplessness, absolute helplessness. That's how. And I was reading them poem by poem, and I just put into the Facebook just to disconnect myself.
Sure.
And I had a huge response from absolutely unknown mothers and just women who had the same experience but had no words to even to explain or to name the experience into themselves. So that's why it was published in Oleksandr site. It's really great to have it, but because I don't know if I would dare to put it into a book, but they are living over there. And Anata Kaminska is translating this very cycle into Polish.
Right.
Sometimes it again amazes me that the things that I feel and I live through are of interest to some other people, but if it's so let it be.
So just the final question, how has your life changed since the war?
It became more of volunteering and hand doing something than of writing properly. Anata Kaminska wrote in her Facebook that before the war she was a poet, if I'm not mistaken, and I myself might say about myself that before the war I was a children's author. If I can write poetry right now, because it's my way to survive. Writing poetry, it's not a choice. It's just, again, my way to survive, because like today I bake pastas. I might be at the warehouse somewhere to sort medical supplies, to connect people, to get something for the army or for the refugees. I can meet children who were displaced, read with them, and do. So I do physically do something, and when I stop, most of the time the poem comes up. So it's not my choice; it just comes, and I can I take some time. Like I'm just doing something on the warehouse, and I need to put my head on a whole mood, let's say so, because after doing something that is connected with war, I want to come back home and to be a mother for my children. So I need some time and some space to, and the best way is just to walk and to think, or just to feel something around me and during that period of time, poems count mostly of the time. So when I'm walking my foot from point A to point B, so they are just coming in again, and it amazed me hugely that they are translated into English, into Polish, into Lithuanian, into so.
Fantastic.
That's again maybe that there. I told it somewhere that we all can read news, but the language of news and the feed in Facebook and the language of poetry are completely different. And sometimes we need this very specific language of poetry to stop and think or to feel, to have a strength to survive.
Absolutely, I agree.
That's secret.
So, there's an American poet who was also a physician and an obstetrician. He brought children into the world. His name was William Carlos Williams.
Yes.
And he spoke about the hunted news. He says there are all these stories in the newspapers about these disasters, and we know that they will happen. We know they're always there. But the kind of news that poetry brings you is the hunted news. It's the news that somehow feeds the soul and feeds the spirit and allows you to reconnect with who you are.
Yes, that's exactly. But if I can write, so to say, adult poetry, I cannot right now write anything chill for children. This level of language is somehow the war destroyed that in me. and I need more, I guess, time and space in my head to rebuild it. And right now, I don't even know how and at what direction it should rearrange to work for the children the way they are now.
Sure.
Because
Well,
we are all in the state of changing, all of us, because you also asked what the word change. It took safety, even the notion of safety, I guess, from us Ukrainians, because either you hear Russian rockets flying directly your house, or you know that they are flying and hitting Mariupol, for example, or any other city and town in Ukraine. If you know about Bucha or any, again, town and city and village destroyed somewhere in Ukraine, you can't be safe. That's for sure. And you don't really know what to do with this, to stop Russia, to destroy Russia, to what? Because it's a huge part of the land. What to do with this? And I guess it lingers not only over us, but also of others. The closest country, again, it's like Poland, because they already felt we have a huge help from Poland, from Estonia, from Latvia, Lithuania, but they feel this same danger. We might be next. I guess that's what, again, unites us and helps us in a way. Kateryna from Estonian, brilliant Estonian poet and a pen member, she wrote to me that, Estonians became nation together with Ukrainians. So this is very powerful for me to think about, but the price Ukrainians pay for that is too much. It's too hard to even to think sometimes. So Lviv is comparatively safe, relatively safe, but still. Would it be so this very night when I'm like in a half an hour, I need to take my children, all three of them, to bed? Would it be safe night for us? It would not be at all safe for those on the eastern and south part of Ukraine. How can I sleep well if I know very many dear people are over there and they are in danger? The same Mariupol. It's
well, I
don't even how to think about in which categories we could about Russians totally destroyed the city. They're now even exhumating the dead bodies out of white. There is no even a bit rational answer to any of what they are doing. Either this is a lie and they telling publicly like that it's the Ukrainians that destroyed Bucha and just the Ukraine, some imaginary Ukrainian Nazi doing whatever they're doing in Mariupol and in other places. Till these killings and rapings and all the absolutely unimaginable cruel things that they do. And because of this feeling, I guess because maybe children writers, they are writing being in a state of childishness in a way. And you can feel, because real children are endangered right now. So you cannot feel for me, it's really like that. To write for children, you need to let your inner child, let it put it out, to let it speak, to let it play. And for that, you need to be in safety. So I guess my own personal destruction is those part of me who wrote for children. I don't know how to write for them right now. I can play, I can do whatever, but not write for them.
Right. Well, given everything you've said about how you have evolved and worked as a writer, I have no doubt that voice will come back to you and that inner child will once more begin to speak to you. And for what it's worth, and I know it's not worth much, but you please do know that many of us, that we're thousands of miles away and in safety, do feel the rage and the horror, and also don't know how, really are not able to understand, to fathom the irrationality and the darkness and the evil of this, and are looking for as many ways as possible to try to be of some modest help. And so please do keep in mind that if you have ideas about things, we of course know about the weapons, we of course know about the closing the skies, and we do call Congress people and do write letters and do send emails and do that. But beyond that, you know, in kind of everybody, I think, needs to be doing things in their own area, in their own field, to find ways to be useful. And so all ideas and suggestions along these lines here are welcome, but you should know that we here, millions and millions of us are watching and with you in our hearts and in our spirits. And it's not the same as being there. We know that, but
yeah.
we really appreciate also you're taking the time to let us know and to give us the hunted news that we need to hear, because we need to hear it directly from you. It is the one thing that actually I cannot stand is listening to these theoreticians, these pundits who are speaking very abstractly.
Yes, that's why I appreciate very much the project that Ostap Slavinsky is doing, like this Diaries of War, because it's the direct speech, very precise, very painful, but it needs to be heard and for all, not just Ukrainians. It is translated into different languages, and also it is a strange thing to say, but I guess we all now have in common. I mean, we here, we have this survivor's guilt. It's also in a way it is very bad, but again, but this in common is also very powerful if we need not to we need to evaluate it properly, because common is what we have actually. We can stay together and to be a shoulder for each other, be a support. So that's why I really I had a talk with Michael Katakis, and he sometimes, though he said that words now are something useless, but no, they are of a great use if they are said in a correct time and directly to a person with the all sincerity of the heart, because actually that's what hold us together. That's what I guess make us humans in a way. A possibility to say frankly very simple things like I'm with you. I'm there for you. That's actually, so thank you very much for being, because now feeling that you are somewhere there, that you are safe and thinking of us, actually very, very powerful right now.